how's it going? And welcome back. We're getting right into our first segment here. This lesson in general is going to be relating to the alligator, which stands for, I'll flip right back to it. Alligator represents artistic perception, in case you forgot. Artistic perception relates to essentially the key vocabulary words that you would use to describe the artwork that you're seeing. So the way this lesson works, to get started, I would definitely be starting this lesson with hookups. My main idea, and one thing I emphasize truly in class, is to get our students to move. So I'd start off with hookup A. So real quickly, if you would, cross your feet, cross your arms, just like so, bring them in, and take one deep breath in, and let it out. Take another deep breath in, and let it out. But of course you would do this a little bit slower and more for the sake of the activity itself. On the third one, I'd say take a deep breath in and let it out very quietly. Then we move right along into hookup B. Basically 2 feet together, 2 hands together, take a deep breath in and let it out silently. On the next one, take a deep breath in and make a funny sound on the way out, like Then again, you want to refocus them at this point. Take a deep breath in and let it out silently. At this point, you basically have your students take a seat. What we're about to move into is in the opening of this lesson. It's basically getting into the idea of front-loading key vocabulary words. But right up here, what I have and what I mentioned within the opening of the lesson plan is the idea of a pictorial. A pictorial is basically a blank sheet of paper like this, and you take your key vocabulary words, draw images of them, and write the actual vocabulary word for it. So I'll run through this as if I was going to be reviewing it with my class. So class, today we're going to be reviewing the elements of art, and I use a bunch of little cues. I'll use those as we're going through this. Class, today we're going to be discussing the elements of art and what they entail. On the snap, class, would you tell me back or repeat what we're going to be reviewing? I'd snap my finger like that, and they'd say, the elements of art! And then we move right along. And I'd say, okay, you know, one thing I really feel is important for you to learn is the concept of a line. With line, there's many different types of line. You could have, you could have a wide line, a thin line, a straight line, a squiggly line, a straight thick line, a squiggly skinny line. So there are tons of variations. What's that called again? By the way, this image represents what? On the snap, you say it, line! And then we move right along into the next term. So over here, you notice there are a bunch of different shapes. This is a triangle, this is somewhat of a square and quadrilateral. Here we have a tree. What are these called? They're called shapes. Whole class, what are they called on the snap? Shapes! Then I move right along. If you notice here, this is a cube. Cubes represent something. They represent the concept of images being in 3D. If a shape is created in a form that's 3D, then we use the word form to describe it. What do you call something that's in 3D again? Form! And then you move right along. Okay, the next thing I want to talk about, notice, hey, here there are 2 trees. What's in between the trees? Space, that's right. On the snap, you say the word space. And then keep moving right along just like that. Next up, what do you see here? Oh, hey, that's an example of, this one's kind of dark, this one's kind of light. Ah, you're right. When we talk about the word color, color represents how dark or how light a color may be. You also may talk about the word hue. Hue describes the name of the color. Intensity is also, think of how intense is the color, or how bright is it, or how light is it. That's an idea of an example. Moving right along, the next term I want to review is texture. On the snap, class, you say texture. Texture! Basically, texture, think of what you can feel, or sometimes we can't necessarily feel it, but you can see it. If you're looking at a painting that was done in maybe an oil-based painting, or some type of painting in that sense where it might have a texture to it, then in that sense it would have a texture. But remember, artists can also create texture that cannot be felt but can be seen. Think of cross-hatching and the textures that that creates. So After this, I'd review it with them. I'd run through it one more time. I'd give an example this time. Hey, class, what is this an example of? They might say, on the snap, what's the answer? Line! Hey, class, if I was like a tree would be an example of what? Shape! Moving on. If I was a box, a three-dimensional cube, that would be an example of a form. If I did this in here, you would find what? And they would say, space! Moving right along, then I'd do the same for color and the same for texture. Then I'd say, okay, these are the elements of art. From here, it gives a great opportunity to now use a sentence stem or use a skill that you may be focusing on in class. Think of main idea. The main idea is or relates to the elements of art. One detail is line, or the main idea relates to the elements of art. An attribute is form. So you can switch out words. They're a perfect place to review that. So the main idea relates to the elements of art. Some key attributes are line, shape, texture, space, color, form. And this is how I would open the lesson, because remember, this lesson is all about the key vocabulary words. From here, moving right along. The next piece, or for the next piece basically, I would open up any textbook. Maybe there's a painting or an image that you just really like, or you know your students will be like, oh wow, that's awesome, or hey, that's really cool. A lot of times literature books or literature anthologies that we use in the elementary school or elementary grades have tons of great images that fit that. History books also have a lot of great paintings. Of course, they relate to the historical era, but that would still work nonetheless. From there, I would find an image. After that, hand out a sheet of paper, a white sheet of paper, and simply say, okay class, what we're going to be doing now is taking this white sheet of paper and folding it 3 times. So it'd basically be 1, like a taco, 2, like a hamburger, and then fold it again, of course, a 3rd time. And when you're all done, you would have 8 squares just like this. After they created the sheet of paper, from there, I'd say basically number your panels, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. After that, basically the way the lesson runs, you're looking at this image. Your job, the teacher would start off by saying something like, okay, in panel number 1, you're going to write the keyword line. They would write it right in just like that. After that, the next thing is you would say, okay, take a look at this image. What are the lines that you see? Your students are basically telling you exactly what they see. Do they see a straight line? Do they see a squiggly line? Do they see a wavy line? Is it a thick line, a thin line? They're just citing examples like, I see this, I see that, I see this, moving on. From there, okay, you've done that part, move on to the second thing. What shapes do you see within the image? Oh, I see a triangle here. Or hey, I see the outline of this boot in this historical figure. After they list what they see, I like to use that koosh ball that I had mentioned earlier. It's just kind of like a squishy ball. It doesn't bounce very well, but it's great for tossing in class because it won't hurt anyone, of course. And I would toss it to, say, a random student, hey, tell me what was an example of shape that you used, or an example of shape that you saw. From there, form, hey, what ideas or what objects within the image do you see that look like they're in 3D, or look like they have that resemblance? Then they would list whatever they saw, move on to space. Okay, so there's this image here of a pear and an apple here. What's in between them? Space. Oh yeah, can you explain what that is? That's what they would talk about here. Color. They're basically going to list the colors that they see. Like, I see red, I see blue, I see green. Think of the hue. Then think of the intensity. Are there different shades of the color? Like, is there a dark blue? Is there a light blue? Also the value, of course, the darkness or the lightness. Moving right along, texture. What texture do you see? Is there a texture on the boot? Is there a texture on the shirt maybe? Or the coat? Or the collar? Or the pants? Or the shoe? Texture is like the gradient. You can create that with cross-hatching. And basically, I would run through all of that on one image with the class. So I do want, okay, we're looking at this image. Talk about line for a little bit. This way they understand it. But remember, you've already front-loaded this idea, so they should have it at this point. If they don't, perfect time to review it real quickly. After that, the idea of line, Talk about it real quick. What do you see? You find examples, your students in that sense. If you notice, I leave panels 7 and 8 open. You can do that. One of the reasons why I do that is a lot of times I'm trying to get my students into a state of metacognition. So I might ask them a question like, what did you like about this? But then explain why you like that or why you saw that. You want your students to think about their own thinking. The idea is to basically get them to use higher order thinking skills in that sense. I leave these for that. Or if you wanted to ask any other type of question related to maybe the lesson, if you wanted to create a connection or have them find a connection, that's the perfect space to do that. So it gives you a few ideas to work with. If you wanted to do something differently, one thing that you could have them do is maybe sketch out an example of space that they saw, or sketch out an example of a shape that they saw, or sketch out the entire picture if you're working with a higher grade level, or maybe write a quick summary of why this is important, or how you went about this, or why you selected certain things. Those are ideas. There's one other thing that I wanted to mention before we move on to our next lesson. The idea is, lately I've been switching out the game of Simon Says, and I've been switching into the game of Be It or Use It. I reviewed that one in, I want to say, the movement lessons. You'll find that game in there. But if I was able to come right back here to the vocabulary, when I'm here and right after I front loaded it, if I get the feeling or the sense that my students are still not entirely aware of what this means, I like to play the game Be It or Use It. I might say be a line, and students would do this. I might say something like use a line, and they'll do tons of crazy stuff. The idea is to get your students to be creative and think outside of the box, because so many times we don't do that in the classroom, and we're saying, look, the information's here in your history textbook. It's right there, you pull it out, or here, it's in your science book because it says here. The idea here is to get them to think abstractly and outside of the box. So Be It or Use It, great game. Of course, you could always use the Simon Says game. Like Simon Says, do hands in there. Simon Says, show me an example of a line. That's one great idea. Thanks again for paying attention here and sticking with us. We truly appreciate it. We'll be moving right on to the very next lesson. Thanks again. See you soon.